Hey guys, I hope you're all doing well and welcome to an automation tutorial, where today I am going to show you how I make my interiors. So I've gotten a lot of comments on a lot of my recent videos of people saying that they like the interiors that I've made and that they would like to know how to make them as well. So this is the purpose that this video is going to be serving, and I'm going to warn you now, this isn't a great tutorial. Apparently I'm not very good at them. I've recorded this about 4 times at this point and I'm still... yeah. But we will get through this. I'm going to attempt to teach you to the best of my abilities how I make an interior. So it's going to be a bit of a longer episode because there's going to be a lot of me fiddling about with showing you how things work. But yeah, all in all, I think this is going to be a very informational video for you guys and I hope you guys enjoy. So it always starts with figuring out what vehicle you are actually going to be making, and in this case we are making an early 90s executive saloon car. So the interior is going to be very business-like, it's going to be very full of buttons, lots of technology, that sort of thing. It's going to be very plasticky and it's going to have a lot of fabrics, and it's going to be a place where the average businessman will feel very comfortable being. And of course, if you're uncertain of what the interior on your car should look like, or at least what sort of design trends were common at place at the time of when your car was made, you can always use the internet. I have done this countless times and it's given me a huge amount of inspiration when looking online and seeing what the interiors of certain cars look like. So the next step will always be body morphing, at least in my opinion, because if you make your interior to a specific body and then you change it, you are most likely going to have to do a serious amount of work to get the interior to fit the new shape of the body again. So I've already done it with this car, but it's very simple. Most of you will understand how to do it. You just take different points of the body and you shift them about and then you get the shape of your body. Once you're happy, that's when you can start making your interior. So we are now ready to make our interior. Now usually at this point I will have already finished the exterior, so I will have things like windshield wipers and mirrors and door handles and fuel filler caps and all that kind of stuff will already be in place, but this isn't going to apply to us for this tutorial because I simply want to show you how I make the interiors. So I'm going to start by flying into the car and having a look at the shape of the interior. So usually what the most difficult part is, for me at least, is to fill in this gap here, and it seems like this body doesn't have... It won't be too difficult for this specific body. So some cars have a really awkward shape which you have to fill, and in this case it seems like it's a very sort of similar curve all the way around. It's very linear in the fact that it doesn't like change the way that it's curved. So what I do is I go into the 3D shapes and I select this cylinder. I place it on the windshield if I can get there, or there, that works as well, and push it into place, and then I put it into 3D. So what I then do is I basically just put it into place, and the way I do this is I line up the middle so that the middle is lined up with this sort of plastic strip here in this case. Different car bodies will have different points where you will meet the middle. In this case it will be this plastic strip with this body, and yeah, then I basically extend it all the way to the side. I make it shorter so I can see what I'm doing, and at this point I can see that I need to shift it forwards a lot. So if I twist it like this, I can make this shape fit the curve of the windshield a lot better. Now this will take a lot of fiddling because it's not always very easy to try and fill in this specific shape. Now luckily with this body it doesn't seem like it will be too difficult, but there will be cars where you will be sat there for a long time and eventually you will find something. In this case actually it seems like it's almost horizontal in how the windshield is shaped. So I always like to have it poke through a little bit, and then I will always twist it through. So it's about halfway to poke through here, and then I'll twist it back, and I'll just keep going until all of it gets covered up, and then I'll slowly lower it down again, and we have now covered the windshield. So as you can see, it is poking out on the side here, and you can fix that by making it a bit thinner. I like to always try and push it to the extremes as much as possible so I can cover these corners as best as possible. So having now changed the color, I can see that there is a gap here, and in this case I'm going to simply fix it by making this a bit bigger so that the gap is not visible anymore, and there you go. There is practically no gap anymore, and I'm very surprised with how horizontal this is. This is a really nice body to work on. So the next step for me is to then make it square. So I will take this piece and I will then turn it into a square, and then I will make basically a flat edge to work off of. Now basically the easiest way to do an interior is once you've got a flat edge, you know what you're working with, and in this case it doesn't seem like it'll be too difficult to get this flat edge in. So I'm going to push it all the way to the extremes on the side here, and then I will just shorten it and make sure it fits. So shorten it a bit, pull it out, and there you can see it's nearly gone now, and it is pretty much gone right here. So it is all the way off to the side. There is a gap here, but you can use pillar fixtures to fix this, and I'll show you how to do that shortly. But yeah, we now have the basis for a custom dashboard ready to be made. So what I then like to do is I like to put in pretty much all the fixtures that I would like to use. So in this case I have spotted this mod that I've got, and all the mods that I have are on Steam, and in this case this specific mod would be the Radio Pack 2. There are 4 in total? I don't know, I think there's 5, but I feel like one of them have been renamed something else. But yeah, so in this second mod pack for the radios, I have found this tower fixture, which I really like the look of. And what I like to do is I like to just put these into the interior. So I've put angle snap on, and what I'll then do is I'll just move it roughly into place of where I want it. So I know it's going to be in the middle of the vehicle, and it's going to be poking out a little bit, and I know that it's going to be at a slight angle as well. So yeah, what I then like to do is, well, for this specific vehicle I have spotted also these climate control buttons, which I really like the look of, which I'm going to use. So I'm going to grab them and I'm going to push them somewhat into place, and this isn't the final positioning for these fixtures at all. I'm just sort of placing them so I can get an idea of what the interior shape is going to look like. So now that I have a rough shape of how I want to lay things out, this is sort of what I'm going to be using. So I know this is going to be a bit of an L design, so the actual design of it will be, it'll have a long horizontal strip over here which will have the instrument cluster and all that kind of stuff, and it's all going to be connected in one piece. And yeah, I think this is going to work out quite nicely. We've got the center bit here with the climate controls and the tower, and then I've got a trip computer and some warning lights, and obviously the automatic gear selector. Now the next thing that I like to do is I like to start shaping the dashboard itself. So I know that this is sort of where the fixtures are going to be placed. Obviously this is subject to change, and I'm very aware of that, and I'm going to take that into account, that these will definitely move at some point, probably somewhere to make it easier to use or something like that, so it looks like it'll fit in better. But now what I'm going to start thinking about is event placement and instrument clusters and that kind of stuff. And yeah, at this point I'm just going to start shaping out the dashboard using 3D fixtures. And I mean, I think I'm going to do this as a time lapse. If you want me to go in depth on how I actually make the shape, then feel free to tell me how you want it basically. And yeah, I'll just do it as a quick time lapse. So at this point I just go in and make a rough shape for the actual dashboard. So I'm taking 3D fixtures and I am laying out sort of where I want the extremities of it all to be. So this is just sort of a template for me at the moment, so that I can get a visual idea of what the dashboard's actually going to look like. And I simply do it by grabbing 3D fixtures, any sort of blocks or circular shapes or whatever, and then I put them into a rough shape so I have an idea of what the actual dashboard's going to look like, and then I move on from there. One thing I also did specifically with this dashboard is underneath the radio and heater controls I also added a little cubby hole, which most cars do have, and I knew that this car would have one. And yeah, so I just added one in, and it's very simple, very basic, and I will spruce it up a tiny bit when it comes to it, but it's just so that I know there is going to be that space there where you can store your personal belongings and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, all I'm doing is shaping things out and placing things where I want them to be. It's very basic at the moment, and that's the whole point of this step of the making the dashboard. And one tip that I will give you, and I completely forgot about it for making most of this dashboard, is that even though you place things, say, on the side of the vehicle and align it to horizon and all that kind of stuff, it will never be quite square. So what you have to do is you have to make it align to horizon, and then put it into 3D, then push it somewhere, and then put it back into 2D, then align it to horizon again, and that way you will get an actually square piece. It has screwed me over a little bit with this dashboard. It took me a while to get some of the edges to line up properly, but I got there in the end, and I will definitely pass that tip on to you because it will save you a lot of time. So now that I've got the basic dashboard shape in place, so I know it's going to be a curved dashboard, it's going to have a lot of buttons on it. This is the point where I start thinking about trying to incorporate things like vents and the actual instrument display for speed and your tachometer and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that is usually the part that I sort of throw in there once I'm comfortable with the fact that I know that the dashboard shape is how I want it. So I know that the actual instrument display is going to be recessed, so I already know that this shape that I've got here, so I've used a half circle for this shape here, that it's not going to work how I want it to work. So I know that I'm going to be replacing that practically immediately, because in order to get the beveled shape that I want and the recess inside of it, I'm going to have to make it out of these flat pieces, which isn't that difficult. I'm just going to follow this line, and once I've got that, I know that behind here is where I can put the speedometer and the RPM meter and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm going to do that now, and then I'll be back with you shortly. So here all I'm doing is I am following the shape that I've made using square fixtures and lining up the edges to be flush with one another, so you can barely tell that it is just a bunch of different fixtures to try and make one shape. And during it I ran into a very interesting problem. Well, not problem, it's more of a bug, I believe. But you most likely will encounter it as well, and that being that as soon as you try and rotate one of these 3D fixtures, is that it will start to move, and it started pushing the actual pieces towards the rear of the car, which meant I had to then realign everything, and that added a lot of time to me actually making this dashboard. But it worked out in the end, and it is just about taking a bit of time and working on it and making sure that what you're doing is basically just what you want it to be. It does take its time, yeah, but it's very doable. So now that I have the shape of the dashboard in, which was a bit more difficult than I'd hoped, but we managed to get it in, and I'm happy with how it's turned out. Now this is the point where I start thinking about stuff that is recessed into the dashboard. So for example, there's going to be some vents here, and they are going to be inside the dashboard. We are going to have our driving display, our instrument cluster, that's going to be recessed, and that's when I now start making those, because I know that as soon as I've got them in place, I can do the covering of the rest of it, and then everything will be in place just how it should be. So yeah, I'm gonna get stuff like the vents in, I'm gonna do the instrument cluster, and then yeah, it's not that difficult once you start, because once you start doing 3D placements like this, then you understand how the rest of it works. And this part here, it's not got anything to do with the actual body of the car. The only thing I focused on was making sure that this like sort of plastic panel up here does not go above this rubbery bit that we made the actual dashboard like head to. So I just made sure that it was underneath the windshield, and apparently I did quite a bad job, so I'm gonna have to adjust that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I did. I made sure that it's, well, I didn't make sure good enough apparently, that it was underneath the windshield, but yeah, I'll fix that, and then yeah, I'll do the vents and I'll do the actual instrument cluster. So what I actually did here is I simply just fixed the poking, the dashboard bit poking through the windshield, which is something that is going to happen to everyone. It's not that specific thing, but more that you will be constantly adjusting things to fit certain shapes. And I mean, it's just something that will it'll be a lot at first, because you'll think, oh, this will work, and then you see, oh, but I want this to work as well, and then you sort of have to make them work together, and it makes interiors a little bit more difficult in the fact that you always have to focus on making sure that what you're doing is ready for the next step in which you've got planned. But yeah, it's yeah. It's what it is. But one thing that I also did here is I started shaping out where I wanted things like the vents to actually be, and where the actual instrument cluster is going to be, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just shaping out the actual interior of the dashboard, and I will get onto the vents and the actual instrument cluster very soon. So yeah, it's turning out alright, I think. Alright, so now that we have our basic shape in, so these are going to be vents right here, and this is where our tachometer is going to be, and all of this is simply just 3D fixtures. I mean, it takes a bit of time. It's not easy. Then, like, once you begin, it's not easy. But once you start doing it a few times and you start getting the hang of things, you understand how these pieces connect. So you sort of have to connect them with the edge and stuff. So with like the little corners of these plastic pieces, for example. And I've been looking at inspiration pictures online to try and figure out what sort of layout I would like. And this is sort of what I've settled with. So it's going to be very businessy. It's going to be very classy. And yeah, so basically the idea is now that I'm going to put in these vents. And this is where our sort of light fixtures are going to go. And then, yeah, I'm going to start thinking about doing the other side of the dashboard. So basically doing stuff like the glove box and the other vent and that kind of thing. And once we have the dashboard finished, we can then start thinking about doing things like the carpets and steering wheels and that kind of thing. Because I usually like doing the dashboards first, because then I know sort of what I'm working with, what I'm working around, so to say, because this is sort of the main feature of an interior is the dashboard. So I like to focus on making sure that this dashboard is nice and that everything else fits to the dashboard and not the dashboard to everything else. So when we start making the door cards, I'll focus on making sure that it fits to the side of this dashboard and all that kind of stuff. And obviously, like I've said, some bodies will work differently. So for example, this one's actually really nice. So I've already had a look. It's a straight line, which will make things like putting door cards in so much easier when you don't have to start making interesting shapes happen. But yeah, all in all, I think this is turning out to be a pretty decent interior, and I'm hoping that I'm teaching you guys something, because honestly, I have never done a tutorial. I have no idea if I'm doing it correct. I will likely do another one of these at some point, just based on what you guys say, what your feedback is, what I can improve on explaining and that kind of thing. So yeah. So what I'm going to do now, like I've said, I'm going to put in the vents, I'm going to start doing the tachometers and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, so with the vents, I'm going to simply be using 3D fixtures like I have been so far. But for the tachometers, I have some mods installed from Steam once again, and they are going to work beautifully for what I have planned here. So yeah, I think I'm just going to get on with it. Once again, it's going to be a time lapse, and yeah, I'll see you guys once I'm done. So at this point, I am putting the vents in, and I am doing that by taking these disc shapes, sort of cylinder shapes, and I flatten them out to make them a bit wider, to make them look like air vents. And I just basically stack them into the openings for the vents that I have. And during this time lapse as well, I also add things like adjusting the rate at which the air comes through the vents, so that little dial you have below it. Or for example, I also added the actual light switch on the left of the instrument cluster, and basically just shaping out what the actual dashboard is going to be like without the actual instruments. And yeah, I think it turned out alright. Sure, there's someone that can do it better, but yeah, I also end up rounding out the vent a bit, because that just gave it a sleeker look. With it all being so square, it almost made it look sort of really brutalistic, and I wasn't a huge fan of it, so I rounded things off a little bit. And it matches the theme anyway of it being a 90s executive car. That's sort of when they started doing more round shapes. So yeah, I think this turned out alright, and I hope you guys are learning something. I am keeping the time lapses very long, so usually I do them at 2000%. For this specific video, I'm doing them at a 500%, so they're like, what, 5 times faster, something like that. Either way, the time lapses are a lot slower, so that you can see exactly what I'm doing, and hopefully you guys learn something from it, because I know that I am terrible at explaining things. Alright, so I've got the vents done. I have also added a light dial. Just sort of basic things that you would include in a car that a car needs. The vent is pretty much just circular pieces. It's just the cylindrical pieces that are flattened down to make it look like air veins, I guess you could say. I also added these sort of, I don't know what you call them, sort of quarter pipe pieces, and rounded these corners out, and yeah, I think it's turning out all right. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to start work on the actual instrument cluster, and once we've done that, I will just detail a little bit, and then yeah, we'll get the rest of the dashboard done. So at this point, it's very simple. I end up using the tachometer and the speedometer and all that kind of stuff, the RPM gauge and all the utility gauges, and I basically just put them onto that face, that recessed face where the dashboard is. And yeah, no, it's very simple. I end up also adding some warning lights and that kind of thing, and yeah, I think it turned out all right. Yeah, one thing I will also mention once again is if you place things on the side of the vehicle and align them to horizon, that is not the horizon, it's a different one. I don't know what is different about it, but you have to put it into 3D, move it around a little bit, then put it back into 2D, and then align it to horizon again, and then for some reason then it works. But yeah, it's a little complicated. I only discovered it around about now, which would have been very helpful when I was making the dashboard, but oh well. But yeah, now all in all, I think it turned out all right. Now we have the instrument cluster in place, and it's a very basic, very simple instrument cluster using a range of mods that I have. I can tell you what they're called. They're called speedometer, tachometer, and utility gauges. And then I used, in the 3D section, I found some, oh, I could just click on it, can't I? There you go. It is called, I don't know. I need to find it again. But yeah, I will see if I can link all the mods that I use. I can't promise that I will, but yeah, this is just me trying to basically just show you how I make an interior. So yeah, now we have the actual dashboard sort of in place, how we want the shape out to be, and sort of detailed, semi-detailed with the basics. We can now start sort of expanding ourselves a little bit. So doing this side of the dashboard, so the actual passenger side of it, starting on the center console, putting the steering wheel and steering column and all that kind of stuff in place, and then we can sort of see what we're working with. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now. I'm probably going to start with the steering wheel so I can see what sort of space I have here, what I could potentially put in here. And then, yeah, I'll start on the other side of the dashboard and then a little bit of the center console, and then it looks like we might actually have a decent interior in this car. So I'm just going to get cracking on with that. as much as I like to make things with just purely 3D pieces, and I genuinely think that is for me the best way for me to make an interior, simply because then I can shape it to be exactly how I want it to be. But I also use things like self-made steering wheels and steering columns and all that kind of stuff. As you can see with all the radio controls, I did not make them myself. Yeah, they're all mods from the Steam Workshop, and yeah, I mean, it's sort of like you've got to find a sort of that point where how custom do you want it to be to how easy do you want to make it. So if I were to make this all myself, it would take so long, but it is doable. The game does allow you to do it, and I have given it a try before, and it does work, but it takes 20 to 30 hours to make a good looking interior using just 3D pieces. So yeah, it's quite the endeavor. Alright, and now that I've pretty much finished the dashboard, I'm very happy with how it turned out. It took me about 3 hours to make what you're looking at right now, so I am going to give some timestamps, well, sort of just time frames of how long stuff takes. I mean, obviously I'm going overkill with this just to show you what you can do if you just spend a bit of time, and honestly, it's just a tiny bit of creativity. If you can sort of figure out how to place pieces in a specific way, then you're set. You just basically just need to 3D place a bunch of stuff inside of a vehicle. I mean, I'm at 167 fixtures right now, so yeah, it is a lot, and that is just the dashboard. This portion, which you're looking at right now, but I think it is worth it. I mean, once you do an interior really nicely, it is definitely worth doing all of this. So yeah, I think all in all, this has turned out pretty alright so far. And yeah, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start doing the other side of the dashboard, which means that then I can start putting stuff like the carpet in, just so I can see where the pedals go. And it's pretty much just a step-by-step process where once one thing is done, you can start doing the next thing, because they all sort of are dependent on one another to make sure it all works, basically. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm going to do now. I'm going to get the other side of the dashboard done, and then I'll be back with you guys shortly. So at this point, I pretty much just make the glove box and the vent, and yeah, I mean, I did experiment also with changing some materials, but I also wanted to keep it realistic, so I ended up choosing a cloth material for the sort of recessed, like the part of the dashboard that isn't the main dashboard. And yeah, something just didn't sit quite right with me, so I ended up changing it to a different plastic, I believe. But yeah, the bit that confused me the most about making this was the actual vent, because I had to make it go around a curve, and I did find a way of doing it, and it's pretty much just using the cylindrical shapes, which, I mean, it worked out lovely, but yeah, I don't know how well it fits into this interior, personally, but of course there's always different ways to do things, and you will discover them yourselves. I'm always learning when I'm making these interiors. I'm learning as I'm making this one. But yeah, I mean, it's doable. But one thing I also did do is, instead of making my own glove box, which I could have done and I would not have been against making it, I just found this modular dashboard mod which had the glove box in it, and sort of this sort of under portion of the dashboard with it, and I ended up using that, and it fit in really nicely, so I ended up keeping that. And yeah, I think it turned out alright, so sweet. Alright, now that I've got the dashboard pretty much finished, I am going to start working on getting stuff like the carpets in and the pedals, and then I'll start working on the center console a bit more, and then basically I'm just going to start working from front to back. And as I'm doing that, carpets, I will then do this, the doors. The seats will always be one of the last things I put in, because you can always make them generally fit very well at the very end. Plus it gives you a lot more space to work with stuff. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna put the carpets in, and for that I am using this floors mod, and it is just, there's so many different floor pieces. I pretty much just use the basic sets anyway, where it's just the individual parts, so I can get it all fine-tuned to exactly how I want it. But even the whole entire grouping of it is actually really well done, so yeah, feel free to use whatever you want. I'm going to just stick with the standard individual parts, and then yeah, I'll get the carpet in, I'll start doing pedals, I still need to do the light switch thing over here, And yeah, I think this dashboard came out really nicely as well. I mean, I want to see if I can try and get this to be less fat, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think all in all this turned out pretty well so far. So yeah, I hope you guys are learning something. I know I've said that like 5 times now, but I genuinely have no idea if this is going to work or not. I've just tried to see if I can teach you guys how to make a really nicely detailed interior. So yeah, I mean, there's plenty of tips and tricks, and I'll be just, well, I'm going to do voiceovers and stuff, and yeah, I'll just basically tell you what I'm doing, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, let's just do the carpet. So I was really silly and forgot to hit record. And yeah, so basically what I did is I placed these carpet bits in. Very simple. I placed a flat piece of carpet in as well, and this smaller piece of carpet. Then I put a hump in the front of it, so like it sort of goes up, and then just the pedals. Unfortunately, I wasn't recording. I wish I was, but yeah, this is pretty much all I did. Luckily, I caught it quickly, because if I had done that while making the dashboard, I probably would not have uploaded this video. But yeah, no, it's pretty simple, this part. The carpeting is mainly so you can get, just to cover the floor, basically. I mean, that's what carpet is for at the end of the day. So yeah, now that we've got the pedals in, we've got the drive selector in, and all that kind of stuff, we can start worrying about getting stuff like the door cards in, and yeah, seeing if we can maybe put the rear seats in. In terms of the boot, I always pretty much, you will notice this, there is a mod called, not walls, pillars and roofs, it's modular trunk, that's it. And there is a parcel shelf in there, which is very useful because you just place it in there and it molds itself to the inside of the body. So if I make this a tiny bit smaller, it's not visible from the outside pretty much. I mean, this will take a little bit of fiddling, but from the inside, it's pretty much just a parcel shelf. So you can sort of just cover what's underneath here using a parcel shelf, which makes life a lot easier, because then you don't have to detail all this back portion, which, yeah, I mean, I could do. It would look interesting, sure, because if you look into the back of it and you can see the trunk of the car, like the boot of it, then yeah, sure, it looks interesting. But yeah, so far I think this is coming along nicely. I mean, from the outside, the interior is already looking really, really good, and if you are able to do something like this, then I am going to be very happy. Yeah, pretty much. I'm just sort of losing my head at the moment. I've been doing this for about 4.5 hours. About 4.5 hours now. And yeah, I mean, this is always going to be a long-winded process. If you want to make a really detailed interior, it does take time. But once you do get the final result, it is something very special. And if you looking at it from this angle, you can just see the detail from the outside. And I think that alone is just enough that just makes me happy. So yeah, that's 200 fixtures though. So we are looking at probably double the amount of fixtures for the entire interior. The dashboard's going to take up obviously the most, because you're just placing an absolute load into the dashboard to try and make it look as good as possible. But yeah, all in all, I think this is turning out alright. And so with this being one of the longer time lapses of this video, yeah, I pretty much just start work on the doors. And weirdly enough, I think this is the part that took me the longest, because usually what I do is I would just grab some 3D made thing, some pre-made mod, and just throw it in there and make it fit. But for the purposes of this, I've decided to just make my own door using 3D parts. Mainly just so you can see how I sort of combine the pieces together, and how you can sort of create incisions and extrusions and all the different shapes you could potentially be making using these 3D parts. And it took a while, but I am very happy with the outcome, and I hope you are still here. Yes, I don't know, I'm terrible at this. And so this is where we stand, and just to make a point out of being able to make interiors using just 3D fixtures, that is exactly what I've done. Apart from this roof mod that I have, these door cards are 100% 3D fixtures so far. I am going to add pockets and stuff, and I'm going to do a little detailing, maybe add a little grab thing in here or something. But honestly, the way it is right now, I'm quite happy with it. It works, and yeah, I mean, all I really need to do is add a space to put a speaker in. Maybe put another speaker pod like up here for your tweeter or something, or maybe put that in the A-pillar. And yeah, then this door card will be nicely sort of decorated, because this looks alright, but it's the little details that end up making an interior really special. So that's exactly what I'm going to work on now. And here I go about making things like the door bins and a speaker holder and all that kind of stuff, and honestly I think it turned out alright. I mean, this is once again all just 3D pieces. That's all this is. And sure, you can get mods to make this quicker by having them be pre-made, but I decided obviously to show you how to make things using 3D pieces. And sure, there are some mods in there like the speaker and the instruments and all that kind of stuff, but most of it is 3D fixtures, and I think it turned out pretty nice. So now with a little bit of time, I have added things like this sort of plastic fixture with a speaker inside of it, some door bins. I've started on the rear doors, and all in all, this is turning out to be pretty nice. I am genuinely very happy with this. And yeah, I mean, it's coming out nicely. I think this is turning into a decent interior. It's very simple. It's pretty much the same technique I've been using this entire time of just grabbing 3D fixtures and just placing them to where I need them to be. So yeah, back, there you go. That's pretty much it. It's just me grabbing things, placing them, and then moving on to the next piece. It's very simple if you break it down to its individual points, but yeah, quite a long-winded process. And so now I start pretty much just doing some finishing touches to the doors. I mean, I tried to fix the fact that the vent on the passenger side was poking through the door, which not great. Then I started doing the rear doors and realized that I couldn't really model the rear doors until I had the seats in place. So I put the seats in, and yeah, all in all, it's just a step-by-step process. So once you sort of realize, okay, I need to do this before I can do this, that's when you do that. And I mean, I'm terrible explaining things, but yeah, all in all, it turns out that making an interior is a very time-consuming process, but if you do it, it is very rewarding, and I feel very happy with the result. So yeah, I mean, it is pretty much, like I said so many times now, just 3D fixtures and yeah, some mods, like the seats, for example, and mods and that kind of thing. But yeah, no, it turned out alright. Alright, now that I've got the door cards pretty much finished, I mean, I still need to add door handles, buttons, that kind of thing. Yeah, I think it's turning out alright. I'm happy with how it's turning out, and you guys could do this very easily yourself as well. This is just a few hours of work. I think I'm on hour 6 or something like that right now, so yeah. I mean, it's definitely going well, and there is a trick that I use for the doors. I don't know whether I've mentioned it, but I take these pillar trims, and because they conform to the body of the car, I just place them like underneath the window so that you can't see the actual door, but they conform down. Now, if you're really good, you could use 3D fixtures for this as well, and I did give it a try, and I managed to get it to work on the front door, but the rear door it didn't, so it looked really weird. So I'm going to leave it like this, even though I would prefer to have done it all completely 3D. I'm going to leave it like this simply because at this point it's been a lot of work. But yeah, I've enjoyed it so far. It has been actually really good fun, and if you look at it from the outside, it is genuinely beginning to look like a car. So yeah, all in all, I think this is turning out alright. So next, what I'm going to start doing is, well, I need to finish off the doors. So, and then I'll start working my way towards the middle. So I'm going to do the center console, then I'll do the I'll do the pillars need doing and the roof and all that kind of stuff, but center console is very important. And yeah, all in all, it is coming out alright. It's a lot of many simple tricks, and just combine them together and you get this. So, I mean, it's working out, so yeah, very happy. Right, so I'm beginning to realize that this is more of a documentary than a tutorial, which is probably... I mean, you can see what I'm doing, and sure, it's a bit sped up at this point, but you can get an idea of how I'm making these things, and yeah. At this point, I'm just detailing the doors, so adding the door handles in, which I make completely out of 3D fixtures, and I really regret doing it because it was so much more difficult than it had to be. And then, I add the center console in. Well, I started the center console, not thinking that I sort of need to tell you what I'm doing. So, yeah, I think it turned out alright. I also added things like the buttons for the doors in and all that kind of stuff. And I think I added a speaker pod to the rear door. I can't exactly remember, but yeah, it's starting to look like an interior. And yeah, these time lapses are long, but I prefer to show you exactly what I'm doing, so that should you want to make an interior yourself, you can follow along or see the little tricks that I use and try and replicate them yourselves in your interiors. And yeah, I mean, I'm not a great teacher. I'm just sort of showing you what I'm doing. Alright, so I finished off the doors, which I think are looking really nice. I mean, hold on, let me... I don't know. Oh well, yeah, so they're looking really nice, and I started on the center console, so I started adding some cup holders by basically just taking out these square pieces and putting in these cylinders surrounded by these quarter pipes, put it in a handbrake, and started shaping the center console. Now, I'm no genius at designing sort of flowing things, so this is a difficulty for me, and I mean, it's definitely not looking bad. But there are people out there that can do it better than me. But essentially all I'm really doing is taking 3D pieces and sort of shaping them to become an interior, I guess. I mean, I want this to sort of smooth in so that it tapers in and then sort of stops about here. So yeah, it's definitely an interesting little project, this. But I'm sure I can figure something out. And once the center console's done, we can think about doing stuff like the roof, and I do actually feel like I would like to do the boot as well and not just cover it up. So I'm going to do that as well. And yeah, all in all, I think it's turning out alright. And I mean, it's definitely taking a long time. I mean, I've now spent about 3 days on this, but it's only been like a couple, 2-3 hours a day, so it's not been a massive amount of work. But yeah, this is a project, and should you ever wish to do it, I would love to see it. It would be brilliant, because this is one of the things I absolutely love most about automation, is when you can make this game look realistic. And from the outside, I mean, we're starting to get there. It is starting to look like a genuine interior, and I love that. So yeah, it's definitely going along well, and I'll just finish off the center console and see what happens. So I just now go about pretty much finishing the center console. So sure, I could have done it a bit better with a bit more detail, but I end up just adding a simple armrest, some cup holders, a little cubby drawer, a space for the handbrake to go in, and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it definitely serves its purpose, but I feel like I could have probably done it a bit better, like adding a little sort of storage bin in the back of the armrest and that kind of thing. But yeah, I'm not too upset with it. I think it turned out alright, and I'm sure you guys could do stuff with a lot more detail than I can here. Alright, and here we have it. We have a center console. Yes, it's not the most pretty center console in the world, but it certainly will do the job. It has the gear selector, it has a handbrake, a little cubby hole, a couple of drinks holders and all that kind of stuff, and an armrest, and yeah, I mean, it does the trick. It looks alright. I think it'll serve its purpose should you drive this car. That's all the whole point of this for me, so yeah. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how I do my roofs. Now, usually I just leave them away because you don't really see them when you look at them from outside. But for the purposes of this interior, I am going to do it. And I'm going to be... it's a very painful procedure of going and taking these roofs, pillars, and walls mod, grabbing yourself a pillar, placing it somewhere in the interior, and then dragging it over to where it needs to be, and then constantly just turning it. And eventually it'll snap into place just how you want it. And yeah, it is definitely going to be a fun experience. Sure, there's probably a better way of doing this, but I do quite like this mod, and it does work quite well. And well, once you get it to work, so I'm guessing it's because of the length of it. It's not agreeing with my demands. Yeah. I will be back once I have made the pillars and the roof. The roof itself is actually quite easy. You just grab these roof fixtures, place them on the roof or somewhere, and then sort of just cover the roof with them. There's different shapes and stuff, so you can fit different curvatures and stuff, and yeah, it works quite well. But this is going to be painful. What's going to be most painful, I think, is going to be this back portion here, because this is quite wide, and yeah. This is going, yeah. I'll show you how it's done, and I'll be back once it is done. So I'm recording these voiceovers obviously after I've filmed the time lapses, and don't worry, I did spot the gap that was in the center console. I can't remember if I fixed it because I'm doing this all while editing, but yeah, pretty much just I'm just starting on doing the pillars and the roof, and yeah, it turned out alright. I'm sure if I spent a lot more time on it, I would be able to get it a bit more nice, because there is a lot of overlapping textures and stuff, but from the outside you don't really see it, and that's sort of where it's important when you're driving this car. So yeah, I think it turned out pretty nice. I mean, it's just a lot of fiddling about with doing these pillars and the roof and that kind of thing, but I mean, the roof itself turned out really nice. I managed to get the fixtures to fit in perfectly, but it's just the pillars and sort of the gaps around the windows that really became an issue at some point, but it wasn't too bad. I managed to get it all sorted out, and I think it turned out pretty nice. And so after actually not that much time, I finished the roof, and yeah, it's not very pretty. Hold on, I've just seen this. This needs to be fixed. But I think it works. It looks alright. I mean, the main thing is you're looking at it from the outside. So you are rarely looking at it from the inside. And when you look at it from the outside, you could barely notice the imperfections. So yeah, I think this turned out really nicely and not that difficult to do. The trick is to turn this into a align to surface instead of a cardinal lock on thing. So basically align it to the surface of the body, and that way you could just shape it however you want. And yeah, turned out pretty alright, I think. I'm very happy with it. If you are, however, doing multiple things together like I've done over here, I would suggest putting your cardinal lock on, simply because then all the faces will be at the same height, which will make life a lot easier for you. But yeah, decided to keep the boot because I thought, why not? Thought it looked alright. I even decorated it a bit from the inside. And yeah, pretty much the only thing that's left to do now is to do the roof, like the grab handles, the mirror, and that sort of thing, and put in the seats, and then we're done. And then we have a genuinely nice interior on this thing, so I'm gonna go ahead and finish that off, and I'll be back with you guys shortly. And so, one final time lapse, and this is a bit of a shorter one. I just add stuff to the ceiling, I added the seats, and yeah, this turned out alright, this interior. Yeah, I forgot some things like the light icons for the light dial and the tweeters and stuff like that, and I'm sure I've missed a bunch of other things, but all in all, I think it turned out alright, and I think I've showcased pretty nicely what can be done with almost just 3D fixtures for an interior. And I mean, yeah, you could do all of this simply with 3D fixtures. It's very, very doable. I just used a few mods that I have to hand, all of which are once again from Steam, to help me speed things up a bit. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the time lapses. Alright, and here it is. About 8 real-life hours later, we have an interior, and I quite like it. Sure, I could have put a bit more effort in. I could have put some carpets in, which isn't that difficult. You just sort of grab these pieces here and then you shape them, just so they can be... hold on. Just so that they poke out a tiny bit, and then you change the color of them. And if I do this, say I want to make it plastic or this cloth, then I just do that, make it a bit longer so it goes into the floor, make it a bit taller so it goes into that floor, and then all I've got to do is widen it. Say I want to make the edging of it white, and then I push it forwards a tiny bit, and then eventually you get the pattern you're after, I guess. I've done it a couple times and it works, but it's quite fiddly. So yeah, most of this is just fiddling around, so it's alright. If you look at it from the outside, it does look like a genuine car, and I am very happy about that. And I've probably made the worst tutorial sort of explanation video known to man. But I thought I'd give it a try. And if you guys have any questions, please ask me, because I'll be able to answer it once I know what you guys are after. But yeah, no, I think I helped. I'd like to think that. But yeah, I mean, sure, there are things that could be done better. There are people out there that do things better. But this is sort of where I am at with interiors, and this is about a year's worth of work, and it appears that the seatbelt is poking through the outside of the car, so yeah, let's just do that. It's not poking through anymore. Brilliant. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, which is like an hour and something long. I'm really sorry about that. But yeah, I hope you guys learned something, and I wish you guys a lovely rest of your days. Bye bye.